war brought rationing that endangered the business. Because some of their colorings were sugar-based, the company even considered a clear Coke, but consumers claimed they could taste the difference. And the end of the war didn't bring an end to the problem. Instead, it brought recession and fluctuating sugar prices that almost killed the company. These crises took their toll on Asa Candler, the man who once had such faith in Coca-Cola.
The Candlers, quite frankly, thought that soft drinks perhaps had gone about as far as they were going to go.
In 1919, the Candler family sold the Coca-Cola Company. The sale price, $25 million, the largest financial transaction in the history of the South. Not a bad return on Candler's $2,300 investment. In retrospect, it was probably a good time for a changing of the guard. American culture was about to be turned upside down.
If you think historically, the Roaring Twenties, the whole concept of the decade is characterized by incredible movement. People were on the go, constantly. And when you're on the go, you get thirsty.
But what was the right drink for this fast new way of life? Prohibition certainly didn't help matters.
The alternatives to drinking in the 1920s are not huge if you want to partake of this daring modern life. The invention of mixed drinks, the martini glass, all of that wonderful apparatus that went with drinking. Then what's the alternative in a modern world? Drinking lemonade is your grandma's era. So what do you do in public to show that you're with it and modern and sophisticated? Well, I think your best alternative is probably Coca-Cola.
It was during the 1920s that Coca-Cola went from being popular to ubiquitous.
Coke really then took it into the next level of saying, we want to be in front of you at every possible chance you have to purchase a Coca-Cola. If that's in the soda fountain, if that's in the gas station, if that's in the grocery store, wherever it is, we want to be there with you because we are America, we are part of your lives, and we want you to be with us.
Within an arm's reach of desire was a phrase the company used frequently then. Technological innovations helped make that phrase reality. Specially built coolers and industry first brought ice-cold Cokes to gas stations serving all those new Model Ts. Cardboard carriers filled with 6 bottles, the world's first six-packs, were another Coca-Cola invention.
Now, today, that just seems so elementary. But back in the 1920s, soft drinks were sold one at a time, and people tended to go into grocery stores, buy them one at a time, because that's what you could easily hold. If you produce something that allows you to take 6 at a time home, what an incredible volume jump that creates for you in the marketplace.
Boy, oh boy.
What a wonderful idea, Helen, to serve Coca-Cola at home.
They're selling it in cartons now.
Cartons?
Yes, 6 bottles in a little pasteboard container.
We buy 2 or 3 of them every week.
Business was good in the 20s. Business was good, and we aim to keep it good.
Keeping business good in the 20s was the responsibility of the Coca-Cola Company's new president, Robert Woodruff. He'd faced the chaos of the Jazz Age, and then some. He took charge in 1923 and would control the fortunes of Coca-Cola for more than 5 decades. Born in 1889, Woodruff had been a college dropout, a day laborer, a fire extinguisher salesman, and eventually the respected and ambitious vice president of a Cleveland truck manufacturer. He was also the boss's son. His father was the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola. Yet any cries of nepotism were quickly silenced by the fact that Robert Woodruff knew how to sell soda pop.
Stories go on about him traveling throughout the South. And at every opportunity where soft drinks were sold, he would stop and he would look at the bottle caps in the coolers and see how many Coca-Colas were sold as opposed to oranges and grapes and other soft drink products. And he would take that as a measure of how well he was doing. And he was never doing well enough.
He's traveling through Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan one winter on the train, and goes in a train station, and there are people bundled up in woolens by a stove, and they're sweating and they're hot. In the dead of winter, it's 35 degrees below zero, but they're hot and they're drinking a Coca-Cola. And he looks at per capita figures and he sees that as much Coke is consumed in Montreal as Miami, and he begins to think we can't just be a summertime drink anymore. We want to sell Coke around the calendar.
Perhaps most importantly, Robert Woodruff understood the power of his company's most priceless asset, its legendary secret formula.
Well, people always ask, is there a secret formula? And of course, Woodruff did a lot to make sure that that was part of the American mystique. I mean, he said it was a secret and then went about publicizing its existence in every way that he could.
When he first came to the company, the formula itself was being held as collateral for a loan from a New York bank. Once the loan was paid, Woodruff personally escorted the formula on the train back to Atlanta, accompanied by guards and great public fanfare.
And put it in the vault in the basement of his family-controlled bank, which is today SunTrust, and it's still there.
The idea of the secret formula would become a source of endless speculation and interest to people around the world. Who was allowed to know the formula? Where was it actually kept? Was it actually even written down? On these questions, the company would always remain tight-lipped.
Yeah, it is one of those things that we won't talk about. We don't want to make public commentary about the number of people who know the formula, exactly where it is, exactly what form it's in, all those kinds of questions. It really just helps keep folks interested in the product. That's a good thing.
I mean, on the face of it, it's rather an absurdity. One would think that any kind of good qualitative analysis and good chemistry could come up very clearly with what the formula was. But it has added to the mystique, the identification of the brand name, and is one of the great success stories in the history of marketing.
But beyond the six-packs, coolers, wintertime, and even the secret formula, Robert Woodruff had one clear vision: that this all-American national beverage really should be sold around the world. Cuba and Mexico, among other countries, saw the arrival of Coca-Cola in the early years of the century, always in small quantities. But Woodruff was determined to take Coke worldwide on the largest possible scale.
I think Woodruff's unusual in this respect, that there may have been other American businessmen who appreciated the potential of a global market, but you didn't find many of them in the American South. But Woodruff had the advantage of working for a truck maker up in Cleveland. He'd made friends with a lot of top-notch businessmen in New York. He had much more of a worldview than you would commonly have expected to find in Atlanta or anywhere else in the South in his period.
And he sets in motion an organization that is designed to sell Coca-Cola outside the United States. Huge visionary. A thought that conflicted with a lot of his own board of directors. People just thought this was kind of a nutty idea.
The real point I think to make is that if there were those who were opposed to what he was doing, that didn't really mean very much. This was really a company which was driven by this individual who was able to use the force of his will and the financial power that he had in terms of controlling the firm to take the firm in what directions he wished to do.
This was a task that would indeed require a great deal of faith.
The problem was getting it beyond the expatriate community. For years and years, you could get Cokes in luxury hotels, on steamships, post exchanges on military bases, but the native populations of the world didn't know it at all.
England, for example, seemed like a natural market. The English had an affinity for soda waters, and there was no language barrier to overcome. But England also had no history of iced beverages. In a country without coolers and soda fountains, Coke was a no-go. It would take 2 more decades and changes to the global culture to make Woodruff's dream reality. By the late 1920s, though, Coke was universally available in America. According to Fortune magazine, out of 110,000 soda fountains in the U.S., only 6 didn't sell Coke. And Americans were keeping these fountains busy. In the prosperous yet